much for your patience today. I'm Iseman of Passport to Pleasure, and this is our monthly Instagram Live called Open Dialogue. Having a little bit of technical difficulties over here, such is the way with technology, but we're going to be joined here shortly by Sophia Domina, professional dominatrix here in Los Angeles, event producer, author, and a ton of other incredible things she'll tell you all about. So just bear with me while we get her logged in with us. So for those of you just joining, again, this is our monthly Instagram Live called Open Dialogue. It's when I speak with all kinds of different sexperts friends. And here we are joined by our guest this month. We figured it out. Tech is not going to hold us back.
Glad to join you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. I'm just doing a little introduction as people are logging in. I know we're getting started a few minutes late, but we do this Instagram Live every month called Open Dialogue, where I, Iseman, a non-monogamy practitioner and expert and educator, speak with other experts within the sex positive space about all things related to, sexual expression, relationship design, communication, and all those yummy, juicy things. So today we are diving in with you, my dear Sophia Domina. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Well, I'm glad to be here despite our little tech hiccups. I'm an LA pro dominatrix, novelist, and an event producer.
Fantastic. And that novelist is a recent title, correct? You just launched your book. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what that is and how people can find that?
Dom and Dahmer just came out in September. It's a fictionalized account of my strange and wonderful life, going from being in a Christian cult to becoming a pro dom in LA and all the misadventures in between.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of material I'm sure you got to work through. For that. That's quite a journey you've been on, and I'm delighted that you're willing to share some of that with us today as well, and kind of talk about where you've come from, how you've gotten to where you are now, and how your specialty, which is power dynamics, how that really applies to when we're looking at building relationship and how that can really impact how we build our relationships. So without further ado, you'll see me kind of glance to the side here periodically. I take notes because I'm a nerd, and it helps me stay on target.
Totally.
So yeah, like I said, today on Open Dialogue, we're going to be chatting about just navigating the power dynamics of human relationships, and also unlocking the sexual and emotional freedom that's available when you can play with power in a mindful way, or power dynamics in a mindful way. So let's just dive right in. I'm a writer as well, so I love terminology and words and the specificity we can get when we understand the right language and the vocabulary that's out there. So I know we hear the words kink and fetish a lot, and I hear them used interchangeably, which I know is not necessarily accurate. So I'd love you to share, what the definition, the difference between kink and fetish is, and what makes someone kinky, basically.
I think that these terms are open to interpretation, and I think context matters. Like, I was just at the kink event of the year, which is Torture Garden, but some people will say this is a fetish event because everyone's showing up in latex, and there's going to be shibari, and there's going to be power dynamics at play among the guests. So sometimes it's fetish. A lot of times when we're referring to like the fashion of kink. Kinks can be anything. Kink can be, I want to be called baby and you're my mommy. But then if you like feet, that's called a foot fetish. So I'm not really dogmatic. They are interchangeable.
Yeah. I think the way that it was explained to me that gave me the most clarity is sort of what you're mentioning is all the different things you can excuse me, I'm still recovering a little bit from the flu. But you can have all these interests, right? That can be kinks or fetishes. And my understanding is that the difference really is about your relationship to those things, whatever they are, whether it's, feet or outfits or terminology or what have you, specific toys. When it's a kink is when it's something that you're interested in, that you desire, that is something that can create arousal. It becomes a fetish when it's required to create arousal, is my understanding of it. So again, back to my nerddom of relationships, it's really about differentiating your relationship with whatever those things are, whether it's just something that does work for you or is something that is required for you. And neither is implicitly healthy or unhealthy, right? Like the relationship you have, once you understand what those things are, you can really understand how to incorporate them into your, your sex life and your relationship and things like that.
Yeah, I like that. That works too.
So when we're talking about when someone is, someone may have a fetish or someone, may be considering things that are considered kinky, what would you say, like, to someone, I think there's a lot of, what's the word? There's a lot of like misinformation around these sorts of things. People can feel a lot of shame when they have interests that are considered, outside the norm, that are considered kinky. Can you talk a little bit about, do you have to be kinky when you're, curious about new things? You have to define yourself in that way. Is there something inherently, out of whack if you're looking to explore these things?
Not necessarily. I think that kinkiness it's obviously on a spectrum. Some of us really embrace it and practice it and go deeper and deeper. And we find, like myself, that it's an intrinsic part of our sexual expression and even just our creative expression. I can't roll back the clock on how much I enjoy sex theater.
Yeah. And I love that too. The performance element. Yeah.
Yeah. All of what I love about kink is theatrical. It's role play, it's imagination, it's costuming, it's scene development. So that's how I approach it. Even if I'm not going towards orgasm or my partner we're not focused on that, I'm getting something out of it psychologically. And that's why I know that I am kinky as an orientation.
Where it's really about the experience rather than, like, I think a lot of people can get caught up in, goal-oriented sex, and the only goal is orgasm,
right,
or ejaculation. And in reality, it's the whole experience, whether it's all taking place in missionary in bed or on a stage in front of your 20 of your closest friends, like it's the whole journey of that shared experience. I think that's beautiful. And I love too, like I think I want to touch just really quickly on the difference between performance and performative, because I think especially for those of us that are socialized as women, there can be a lot of pressure because most people are getting their sex education, whether we like it or not, from porn. And most porn is really for the male gaze. And so it's giving a whole generation of people an education from one very specific type of sex, from one very specific viewpoint. And it can feel performative if we're not taught how to really drop into our own interests and our own expression and our own pleasure. So can you talk a little bit about how kind of finding your pleasure actually led you to performance, and the difference between performative sex versus performing as a part of sex?
Well, part of being a dom is that I'm requiring my submissives to perform for me. So I have taken the male gaze and sometimes I'll turn it off completely. They may have to avert their eyes, no eye contact. I may blindfold them. So when I say sex theater, I don't mean that I'm putting on a top hat and performing a little ditty. I mean that I'm the director. So a submissive comes in and now they're on my stage and they're being directed by me. So I find it extremely powerful and subversive, and not at all playing into the male fantasy. It does, of course, because I like to present a certain way for my own enjoyment, but I'm not there to serve that fantasy. I'm there to serve my own imagination.
Well, and can you talk a bit about why your clients might come to you? Like, what is it that you notice? Maybe there's themes that you notice people are seeking, or, stuff that's maybe surprised you about why they come to you?
Yeah, of course, it starts with finding a dom attractive and intriguing, but it's also a confidence. It's an aesthetic that draws you, and then it's kink sync. Do they like the type of kinks that I do? So there in the archetypes of dominatrices, there's the queen, the mother, the disciplinarian, and the sadist. So if you're a deep masochist, you're going to look for a woman, a dom, who doles out pain. She has all the implements. You're going to leave with rosy peaches and maybe some souvenirs for the next week or so. I'm less of a sadist, and I'm more of the queen, nurturer, disciplinarian. And so my clients are seeking that type of dominant feminine energy from me.
And how do you go about, how do you determine, I should say, when both for yourself as a professional, when you're deciding whether or not to work with a client, and then also if you can frame it in a way that's, you know, advice for when people are building relationships with these power dynamics in mind, what do you look for to note whether an exploration of power exchange is healthy or unhealthy?
Good question, because it is very important for me that it's healthy. I'll sometimes get requests, especially online, when people are able to contact me on certain platforms, that I will not engage in. For example, someone was like, I want you to make me stuff myself and overeat and gain weight. Like that, no, we're not doing that. So first, is it healthy? Second, can this person articulate their desires? Where are these submissive desires coming from? Do you know your boundaries and your limits? Can you express those to me?
I think that's key for me as well. Excuse me. My own journey with really exploring power dynamics. And look, I'm still on it. We all are, right? There's not this like finish line. For me, it was really, really healing to step into this space, because I'm someone who's very dominant in most areas of my life, really in charge, together, get it done, like all of that. And I deeply crave at like a, excuse me, at a cellular level, the ability to really hand that over. But that requires, like, I can't fake that, right? I can't be like, okay, fine. And that's kind of what I got used to in a lot of relationships, of like, okay, I guess, but I don't really trust that you're going to execute at a level that is, you know, adequate for me, that kind of a thing. And so really learning to own that was part of what created a much healthier relationship around this exploration of really knowing what I need and what it feels like to feel taken care of, to feel the ability to trust a person to execute whatever the thing is to my standards, like really learning what those edges were for myself, and then also being able to effectively communicate them was key. And that way, though, that part of, you know, your life is really is a container for a lot of really, really helpful deep work, if that's what you want to do with it. And I know for me, it's definitely been a huge part, you know, as someone who's experienced sexual assault, I really found a lot of reclamation in those dynamics, and really understanding my own power, and how, you know, how should I say, sharing power or shifting power dynamics is not, there's no weakness around any of that, because it's an act of choice, it's an act of dialogue, it's an act of conversation that we're in. And that's just like, it just impacted. I'd love to hear from you as well. I don't want to like dominate this conversation, but sorry, I'm going to be full of horrible puns.
I love the horrible puns. My book is called Dom and Dom.
Fair. We're in good company, which is like one of my favorite titles I've ever heard, by the way. Yeah. Absolutely love it. Really looking forward to reading it. But yeah, like for me, it was very much, there was a lot of healing involved in this. That's not necessarily a requirement, but having that as an outlet changed so many things in so many areas of my life. It opened up so many avenues of opportunity, deepening of, you know, non-sexual relationships, opened up how I do business in much more authentic and empowered ways. Because you can, you know, here I was thinking I'm this, you know, dominant personality, but a lot of things I was doing were actually coming from an insecurity versus coming from an actual level of confidence and knowing of self. So if you don't mind sharing kind of how, you know, maybe earlier in your journey, because, you know, now you're in relationship with this professionally, but for you, the personal side of the journey, I'd love to hear kind of how that helped you. You've transformed so much in your life, as you're sharing in the book.
Yeah, it's definitely been a healing journey for me, and a way of operating in the world that goes beyond just having a session. Um, Now I believe in myself as far as taking up space, speaking my mind, having boundaries as soon as I feel the need to enforce them, especially with men.
Yeah.
And my background was in this Christian religion, which turned out to be a cult. All women were submissive to all men, despite their relationship. If you were born female, you were in a state of submission at all times. And that never fit my personality. And so I left that, I broke free from that, and I needed to explore myself sexually. And I happened upon kink and understood, oh, I've been operating in DS dynamics for a long time without
Just
knowing
not
it.
consensually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I was dominant with my husband at the time,
Mm.
my ex-husband now. He was deeply submissive.
Mm.
And without an understanding of it and the language, we were so frustrated
Yeah.
because the opposite was supposed to be true. You know, he was the Christian husband who should be leading, but I was the manager of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I just found this is the natural expression of myself, and now I can find people who want me to be that at my most amplified version instead of making myself small.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think you touched on something really important, that idea of like who we're supposed to be, and what maybe might actually be more authentic for us. And then the sort of implications that society makes about that, as, in the Dom sub dynamic, for example, that submissive equals weak
Right.
or not.
No.
Incorrect. If you understand these dynamics, the sub who, in a sense, is really making the call, because
Right.
you're entering this agreement, right? You've talked about it all before. Can you talk a little bit, actually, that would be really helpful, on like, what does it look like to create a scene? Like before you step into something, maybe with a new client, like what is the process of really creating the relationship that you're building with that client?
Yeah, if it's a client, then I know we're going to kind of shorten the process and get right to it. But I still have them fill out my BDSM checklist, which tells me their level of interest and their level of experience in a variety of kinks.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're my kinks or not, I just want to get a snapshot, like a portrait.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I'll even have them journal to me. I'll give them a word count and a prompt, and it's usually about the origin of their submissive desires. I'll ask them what they want to experience in the session. And then at the top of the session, we talk first, and then I start teaching them submissive positions with their body. So start getting them into subspace gently before we start pushing deeper.
Mm-hmm. And have you created, it sounds like you create a lot of specificity before you step into anything physical, in a scene, in a session, or anything like that. Is that similar to how you build relationship in your own personal life? Like, is there a similar process? I know you said you kind of shorten it, so it sounds like maybe there's something similar that has a longer runway.
Yeah, if it's more of a personal or romantic dynamic, then I'm looking for someone who's not just here to sample my dominance like a buffet. I always say this is not a drive-through. You don't just come and order off my menu and Sophia just delivers your meal. So I'm looking for, in my personal life, people who will add value over time and really prove that they have my interests at heart and not just trying to grab something and go.
Yeah, I think.
But whereas with the client, there's a transaction there, so there's value that's intrinsic to that.
Well, and I think it's exactly what you said. There's a shorthand that's created, right? Because I do not subscribe to the idea that, money is the root of all evil. No, it's just a tool, right? It's an energy. It's what you do with it. Transactional is not a 4-letter word.
Mm-mm.
It's just an agreement.
Exactly.
So it's the manner of your agreement, because everything in life is transactional. If it's a healthy relationship, everything is a back and forth and a give and take.
I like that.
So just depending, it's just depending on what are the materials that you're transacting with. Some of them have a shorter runway than others, and that's okay. It's how you're managing that relationship. That's really what's important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will often have clients and subs, just lifestyle subs, journal to me after the session for my own enjoyment. You know, write me a story or a poem or a love letter, whatever naturally comes out of you, because I love like just the richness, like the cinema and the literary appeal of all of these scenes that we're acting out. It's fun.
Oh,
And so I try to always keep it like playful.
yeah. I love that because I always say like we are the author, you know, or we are the director, whether we realize it or not, of our own life. So
Yeah.
everything that you're going through is a scene that you're creating, whether it's active or passive, and really understanding your relationship with that is something that can open up so many areas of your life, personally, professionally, familially, like every area. So let's see. We're talking a lot about the dynamics. Yeah, oh, and I actually do want to talk about this really quick before I go to the next question, because it's something I think everyone, or I don't want to speak in absolutes, a lot of people who are, you know, sex educators, relationship educators as well, like anyone who's really working in this space with topics and skills that are related to our personal lives, there can be a lot of blurred lines for people, especially when it comes to people like you and I dating in our own personal life. That idea that like, it kind of becomes a session. I know I've certainly run into this. And so having a clear grasp on those boundaries, and again, understanding that transactional is okay and that there needs to be a value add as well. For me, like, it's not, a date is not a free session with me or you. Like,
right.
we are exchanging. So if you're not exchanging any other value, then you need to exchange financial value so that it is an equitable arrangement.
Yes.
Oh, and we're getting some great comments here. I like that you do a checklist. It's good to see how a person's mindset is. Absolutely. You really have to set the stage and understand who you're relating with. And then, yes, Sophia, quality over quantity. Everyone can have sex. Not everyone can have chemistry. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
beautiful.
I do this for fun.
Yeah.
I'm not,
ideally.
Yeah, even my work, I really want to enjoy it because I come from a really oppressive system where I was basically a slave laborer for another organization. So it's important that I like my clients and I like the sessions.
Yeah. I think it's really important to note too, I'll see flack about, you know, how like you can be healthy or unhealthy in any area of your life, in anything you're exploring. And there is a potential for healing in this space. So yes, it does draw people that are looking to recover from something. And that's okay. We have a very sex negative culture. Our culture has a very unhealthy relationship with sex, and quite frankly, relationships, with love, with every way we connect intimately. So finding spaces that are, that's the term, sex positive, that are open to you finding your way forward, learning how to heal, learning how to connect and be intimate in a healthy way is great. It is a response to an already unhealthy dynamic. I think what I'm trying to say is I know I can get a little frustrated when, you know, there's so much public shaming of this space as being intrinsically unhealthy, when it's a response to a very unhealthy culture that we're all sitting in.
Agreed. And I feel really privileged to make deep impacts in people's lives, even if we only have a brief interaction over a few sessions, or we, you know, date for a few months, whatever it is. I know that as a dom who's caring and actually putting the other person's interests first, like that's a rare space for someone to enter into. Like you mentioned, being the submissive means that you're standing in the power of your vulnerability with someone.
Yes. Well said. I love the power of vulnerability. Absolutely.
Yeah, it takes a lot of confidence to open yourself up that way. And so I am glad that the work that I do is healing that way. Like, I want to do good work for people. That's my new mission, is this sex positive space for whatever your weird, deviant desires are that we can have fun with.
And For those who are just listening and not watching a recording later on, weird had quotations around it because that is not, there is nothing wrong with weird. Nothing's to me weird. It's just something you're interested in.
Yeah, and
let's get curious.
I am careful with my words. I prefer to use the word deviant instead of perverted.
Yeah.
There's certain words that have religious connotation, like promiscuous. I will not use judgmental words like that. But being weird, I mean, I love
get weird.
Kinky weirdo.
Yeah. Here for it. Well, this is a perfect kind of pivot. We actually have a question as well from one of the folks watching right now. Can you talk more about the therapeutic aspects of your work? And that's kind of exactly what I wanted to kind of move into. We've touched a bit about healing. Can you share maybe what you've personally experienced? We've touched on a little bit, but maybe also some clients, maybe what you've seen, some transformations that have happened, how you've seen it really impact people's lives.
Yeah, there are maybe two types of healing I can talk about. One is reprogramming yourself when it comes to traumatic experiences you may have had when you were forced into submission. As you mentioned, like a lot of us are survivors of sexual abuse. So that's one way where now you're choosing to experience pain in your body in a way that's not abusive. It's by someone who cares for you and is being responsible. So you're like reforming those tracks in your mind. The other is that we can take the patriarchy and we can just fuck it. Because
literally
we have these ideas, we have this conditioning, what masculine and what feminine looks like. And in this DS dynamic, especially if it's a female dom and a male sub, now we're saying the masculine ideal is out the window. And for me, I don't have to be a quiet, demure, feminine person. So it's healing, and it's that way is that we're undoing society's conditioning and creating a space where we can be authentically ourselves.
Yeah, I think that again, and something you said earlier too, the power of vulnerability for me is something that was really unlocked, that really flipped the lid on my understanding of what strength and what weakness really is. And when I first started exploring my first few experiences with alleged doms, and I know you know what I mean. Dominant is not necessarily a synonym for dom. Dom is a very specific term that means someone has experience and knowledge base in these relationship dynamics and working with power exchange. You can be dominant and not a dom. And what I experienced was a lot of people where their dominance came from what I now understand, insecurity rather than vulnerability. And so really getting to, open up into this space and experience all kinds of different types of doms, as you mentioned earlier, learning things like, sensual dom, I discovered was something that was really helpful for me to really feel cared for and taken care of in a dominant way, but from a place of vulnerability and genuine caring is what really unlocked that for me and enabled me to finally experience what it means to give over, being in control, which is how I started to understand my strength in my vulnerability, not my strength in being forceful, right? And really, again, all of those things started flipping for me. Beautiful. And then we've got a question here as well. What's the most common fetish you see in your practice?
Feet.
Like right out the door.
But that's not particular to me. That's just universal. And I love women's feet too. So I got on that train quick.
Is it more like, this is a question just for me. Is it your feet, their feet? Is it you doing things to their feet, them enjoying your feet?
Mostly mostly it's men enjoying women's feet. There's a lot of reasons why. Number one, women take care of their feet. They're typically, beautiful. Also, serving someone's feet is a sign of lowliness and submission. It's a dirty part of the body, air quotes. Some people like the feet to actually be sweaty and dirty. It's a way to just really primally worship someone, among other body parts.
It's the gateway body part, perhaps. It's like that taboo-ness, like it's so vulnerable to be seen, not only seen and witnessed, but accepted and held in what you might consider, your darkest corners, and like that, the level of self-love that can come from that. We got some feet fans in the comments here.
Yeah, also
For sure.
the pleasure that the recipient can experience. There's a lot of erogenous zones in the feet, like a tongue between the toes can be very stimulating. So it's a positive feedback loop.
When we explore the unknown, we can get opened up to things we didn't even know were possible. And the same thing with, sexual kinks and fetishes. It's how I talk about relationships as well. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And when we have, a sex and relationship negative culture where it's like, this is the one way to have sex, this is the one way to relate, we're not getting exposed to all the options that are actually out there that are perfectly healthy if you want them to be. And so we're not actually able to make a choice. We're in a submissive relationship with our life when we don't know what's actually out there, and so that we can actually make an educated and informed decision. And that's actually perfect. We've got a question in the comments now as well. Is monogamy harder for men or women? I would say, I'll jump in real quick, and then I definitely want to hear what you have to say too. Any relationship dynamic that is not an informed decision is going to be hard for anyone involved, regardless of gender. When again, it's this dominant submissive dynamic. When we're doing something because it's a prescription, it's what we call compulsory monogamy, is what most people are involved in right now, which actually very quickly for the average person turns into unconsensual non-monogamy or infidelity. So most people are actually non-monogamous. It's just whether or not you're doing so from a consensual, quote, ethical perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, totally agree. By the numbers, men cheat. Women are catching up statistically.
Along with our financial autonomy.
But physiologically, you cannot sustain the initial chemistry, the initial touch. I love Esther Perel, as far as trying to get to understand why monogamy doesn't work long term. A lot of it is physiological. And also, we put all our eggs in one basket with a single partner, and then we wonder why they can't serve all of our needs and hopes and desires. So it is a recipe for disappointment for most people. So I'm not a relationship anarchist, but I am a relationship deconstructionist.
Oh, I love that.
So I like to take our traditional systems apart and say, hey, actually I like this part of monogamy. I like this part of polyamory, and build the thing that suits you and that person or persons at that time. Exactly. And then recognize that people will change.
Exactly. And your relationship is going to change right along with you, or should ideally be a space in which you can grow. Yeah, I like to say I'm a bougie bitch. I want a designer relationship. Why just grab a relationship?
I like that.
Yes. Couture relationship. Because really that's what it is. We're all, human behavior is a scientific study for a reason. We are not necessarily all unique snowflakes, and that every single one of us, we experience the world in unique ways, but there are behavioral patterns that, enable us to make decisions about how might be best for us to interact with most people based on what our needs are. So when you have an understanding about your, sexual or physical needs and your emotional or romantic needs, which are actually two separate needs on two separate planes, then you can really start looking at what are all the different relationship dynamics and how do they meet each of those needs. Do I have a high level of exclusivity when it comes to my emotional partnerships, but maybe no real exclusivity needs when it comes to sexual relationships? Great. You might be suited for an open relationship where you have one primary emotional relationship, one primary emotional partner. Or you can have, a triad dynamic where you have a primary relationship, regardless of how many people are in it, but then you have many sexual partners, right? And so understanding that you get to create this dynamic, kind of like how you create, your scenes with your clients. You understand yourself, you understand the tools that are available to you. Now you can build something that's actually serving you. And again, like to your point, exactly, ideally, you're always growing and changing. So your relationship is going to be growing and changing. You should be checking in regularly. I would imagine you don't just do, one checklist with your client and then it's the same thing forever. You're having them journal. You're doing check-ins with them to see where they're at on their journey, how you're adjusting the work that you're doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. That. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, you touched on it a little bit about what's the term you use, like erotic archetypes or dom archetypes, basically, that you touched on a little earlier. Can you share how, understanding where you fall in that professionally, has that impacted how you show up in your personal relationships? And do you find that you express different archetypes in different personal relationships?
I'm pretty true to who I am. And so I attract all kinds, but the relationships or clients that tend to work out are the ones that are really seeking my authentic expression of self. And it started as a lifestyle before I felt confident enough and really wanted to take it professionally. I was just exercising this dominance personally. So there's not really a separation. Like this is just who I am all the time. Now I don't force people into a dynamic with me. Obviously I have friends where we're equals. There's not a power exchange, but pretty much this is how I live my life now, personally and professionally.
Cool. Have you noticed, it was a journey, and like the different parts did you find like earlier maybe you were trying to make more of a differentiation and then realize that like, no, actually this is the thing, this is it, and it's going to be the through line, like to create those boundaries, you know what I mean, like personal to professional?
Yeah, I mean there are clients that I certainly wouldn't want to have an ongoing personal relationship with, like it's confined to a session. But again, I see very few clients because they need to be up to the standard that I have as people. I'm looking for good character as far as the people that I'll dominate, even for money. So I don't feel such a separation. Of course, like I keep things professionally, right? And I have my own boundaries as far as like the sexuality that will be part of a client session. But I've tried to make the personal, the professional, and the professional, like I've blended those things. And I host events too. I wrote a book about it. So it really is just, my whole life is kink now.
I get that. I mean, I do what I do because I love talking about this stuff. I nerd out on relationship dynamics and communication practices and human behavior and all of it. So, it's what we touched on a little earlier about, really working to create those boundaries for ourselves in our own private lives versus what we do professionally. And that idea of transaction being an important component of that, of what is the exchange, that there needs to be an exchange. Your relationships should be adding value to your life. What that value is what gets determined on whatever transaction that you're talking about, which is just an agreement, which is all a relationship is. It's an agreement.
Yeah, I would encourage, especially women who get into relationships, like really look at the value that you provide for someone in that space and make sure that you're getting taken care of. Because as women, we tend to serve above and beyond, and we really could step back and say, hey, you know what? The emotional value that I add, the nurturing, all of the like forward thinking and the architecture I'm providing for this relationship, what's in it for me?
Well, it's like, we get socialized in these, gendered, we're coming out of this few generations now, not actually that long, just a few generations of being socialized where, the gendered expression of male is provider and the gendered expression of female is caretaker. Really, those are both, they're kind of synonyms, and we've just differentiated what the provided thing is and what the thing being caretaken is. When we I should say, have all of those capabilities, and as we're now finally, seeing more autonomy, financial autonomy for non-men, we're seeing more, we're seeing a demand for more from everyone, right? We want to be emotionally provided for. If we're, in a hetero dynamic with a man and we're a woman, it's not enough to just pay for things. We're paying for our own things. So that's where I think this conversation of relationship design is really coming back into the fold. Like, when we have a more equitable society, again, we can enter into conversations about what do we want to create together. So I see a couple questions here in the comments elaborating on the parts of relationship structures and what our romantic relationship's going to look like in 100 years. For my hope is that there'll be designer relationships, that we understand relationship as a skill set. That's the other thing that really blows my mind. Something like what you do, Sophia, involves a lot of skill and education and understanding and practice. Well, it's relationship. What you do, Dom sub dynamics, it's relationship. And we don't see that generally in our society. We see like, oh, well, you probably had parents and they probably taught you, how to build great relationships, right? Like, we all have great parents with great communication examples,
so
right?
Great.
That's normal. And so it's just this thing you're supposed to do. Like, okay, now go relate to each other. And we wonder why we have the divorce rates we have and the abuse statistics and all these other things. We're in such an unhealthy way when it comes to relationships, when it is a skill set. It is something that you can be good at. And so that takes investing in knowledge, and there's some questions here on like how to do that in the comments. So I'll share a little bit about, what I offer in that space, and feel free to do the same as well, Sophia. But I do host, workshops. I do work privately with clients as well. I do speaking engagements. I provide tons of online content for free on my YouTube, on my Substack. I am going to be hosting a workshop coming up. I have a foundational workshop called ENM 101, Exploring Healthy Non-Monogamy, which you can access at any time on my website. You can purchase that. It's always available. And then I do live versions of that as well, where you can get your own questions asked. I deep dive even further into certain areas based on the questions we're receiving in those workshops. So you get a whole understanding of all the different relationship dynamics that are available, how to really determine what your needs are on your hierarchy of exclusivity for your physical sexual needs and your emotional romantic needs, so that you can determine your IRS, which is your ideal relationship structure. And then you build your relationship agreement, because again, your relationship is just an agreement, just like a Dom sub agreement. You are entering into an agreement with someone or someones. And so it's a literal document you create together that helps guide that relationship, that again, you're reviewing regularly and changing, just like you are changing, just like your relationship is changing, so that the relationship is a consistent container for the growth of everyone involved. So you'll see the links to that in my bio. I offer a number of other workshops as well. I'll be doing a workshop about play parties as well coming up next month, about how, if you've never been to a play party, everything to expect, how to get prepared, how to feel confident. And if you've been to play parties, how, if you're ready to maybe potentially host your own, I'll give you some tips and pointers on that as well. So Sophia, how can people work with you and learn from you?
Well, they should start with you, first of all. That's very thorough. And while I deal in relationships, and it is a deep personal interest, like what I'm dealing with is power exchange for the most part. But my advice is always first to sit with yourself and dream big. What is the ideal that you want? Your wildest fantasy for a relationship, or a dynamic, or a scene. Sit with your fantasy, journal it, ruminate, grow it. Just imagine that it's possible. And then when you're educating yourself, just be voracious for knowledge. Like I said, Mating in Captivity is one of my favorite books about relationships. Esther Perel. If you're exploring polyamory, read Polysecure. It's required reading for anyone getting into a relationship with me.
Just looking for a shout out.
Yeah. So educate yourself. Go on blogs. Hire someone to, consult with. And then don't be afraid to step away from relationships that are not what you want. Even if you have affection or attraction for someone, you've got to be prepared to sit with yourself sometimes until you meet your match.
Yeah. Well, and recognizing that you can, I I teach and I coach from an inclusive relationship perspective. So like we talked about earlier, that idea that there's this one magical shining star in the universe that somehow is going to provide you everything that you need, that we used to need from an entire village of people.
Right.
And that they are also in turn, not only just going to provide you all of that, and you're going to be attracted to them and everything, but they are also going to get all of that from you and be attracted to you. And all of this forever.
Right.
So that's crazy.
I have really in my own life de-emphasized forever.
Yeah. Well,
it's been helpful for me.
Yeah, I think it's you can have intention, but it's like you said, really like sitting with that fantasy, really seeing yourself in it. Same thing with relationships. And we have a few comments here about, my ideal relationship is I'm Conan the Barbarian and she is an ambivalent goddess that I'm powerless against. That sounds like a potentially a great fantasy to explore in, a power exchange dynamic. But when I use terms like relationship dynamics, what I'm talking about is the ongoing agreement that is your day-to-day lived relationship. So whether that's an open relationship, a polyamorous dynamic, hierarchical, non-hierarchical, if you're a relationship anarchist, if you're a monogamist, those are the relationship dynamics that I work with. And then Sophia specializes in power exchange dynamics from a sexual standpoint. So again, understanding the difference between our sexual relationships and our sexual needs, our physical needs, and our emotional or romantic needs. They can absolutely be related, but they are two actual separate needs. And I think something I see a lot with couples who come to work with me. I work with individuals as well, but primarily couples who are looking to transition their relationship in one way or another, whether it's, opening up to include someone new, close their relationship sometimes as well. It's those transition points that I really work with people on. And I'll see this, conflation of sexual and emotional. Well, if he's sexually desiring or she is sexually desiring someone else, then she loves me less. Well, let's break down the two important elements here. One, there's not 100 love points that I have to take away from you to give to someone else. Love is an expansive emotion. And it's actually scientifically proven that both sexual attraction, like physical experience, and emotional love are both expansive traits. So what that means is when you're feeling attraction, you feel more attraction. When you're having great sex in your relationship, you desire more sex. When you're feeling very loved in your relationship, you can feel more connective to other people. There's a great study that just came out talking all about this. Like if you are masturbating more, that might mean you're having a lot of really great sex. It just made you the more, basically. So it's kind of like you are what you eat, which is a whole other conversation train we can go down. But you want more of whatever you're already getting. So it's really important to differentiate those things. So again, first of all, it's not like this ceiling that you hit and I have to take away from you in order to feel love or attraction for somebody else. But if you're talking about sexual attraction and you're conflating it with love, it's really important to denote that. They're not saying that they're looking for an emotional relationship with this other person. They're saying they're sexually attracted to this other person. That has nothing to do with your love relationship. So really breaking down those two key components is really, really important. That's the kind of work that I do as well with a lot of my clients. Those are common, what I call compound meanings. So we'll hear different terms and think they're the same. Our needs being one of them, but a big one is, love, sex, and commitment. Those are actually three separate ingredients.
And I would add to that, consider how power dynamics are already at play in your relationship and how you can be more honest and define them. It's hard to talk about sometimes when one partner just has more power than the other. Like that comment about being powerless, like some people want that in a psychological way in a female-led relationship that's not based on the sexual desire, but based on the psychological desire to fully submit to someone in partnership.
Exactly. And you can desire it in different areas, right? You might want to feel powerless in this area of your life, but not necessarily in this area. So being able to, like powerless, in the bedroom, but very much not so when it comes to financial decisions that you're making in the family or whatever that is. So really getting clear on those different areas, that nothing is all encompassing necessarily, unless that's what you're negotiating.
Sometimes they want that is something that I have counseled men on. I've been asked that question: how can I enter a female-led relationship? And I have advice on that for sure.
Are you open to sharing a couple tidbits?
Well, I challenge men especially to still consider how they're showing up as a responsible partner, as an adult, how they're adding value. Because there's a distinction between being a submissive and being a slave. So slave, being in a female-led relationship, this is a desire to really fully submit in many aspects of life. Maybe not all, but many. And so I challenge men to not just show up and say, lead me, dominate me, care for me, but really have a realistic plan of how you're going to still show up as a valuable partner for that woman who is dominating and leading.
And I guess this is where kind of the boundaries are helpful, right? If you're entering a relationship, it's a partnership. So understanding that exchange versus you're hiring someone to create a container for you to experience something.
Right.
The exchange is that. I think that's really, really important. That value add is so key. You can provide, I think is the terminology we said earlier, you can provide all manner of different things in a relationship. Money is not the only way to provide. Sex is not the only way to provide. There's so many different things that you can bring to the table. So when you're able to have, what might be uncomfortable conversations to start, the whole world opens up because you get to be so specific about those things. I would like to talk, speaking of uncomfortable conversations, if you're open to sharing a little bit, when you work with people that are maybe not able to be open about working with you to the people that they're in relationship with, whether they're married or what have you, can you talk a little bit about why that might be, any advice maybe for people who are in a situation like that on if they do want to open up, what the best way to do that might be?
Yeah, it's common knowledge that people seek out sex workers for taboo fantasies or even for needs that they can't have fulfilled in their primary or their other relationships. I don't judge. I don't require them to confess to anyone in their lives. I operate within what I consider to be my own ethical values, and I hold to that. Of course, I encourage people to be authentic and true in their relationships. But if they're not ready or willing, that's beyond my control. I set an example. I give them reading material. I'm always telling people to read the books that I've mentioned. And I live my life really open and authentically. So I try to lead by example.
Yeah, I think it's something I run into for sure. I'll get feedback sometimes from people who really want to work with me, but they're terrified of, bringing that up to their spouse because they think that means, okay, well, we're working with this person who specializes in, non-monogamy. That means, tomorrow we're going to be opening up and we're all going to be having sex with a bunch of different, no. I help people open up. I help people experience open communication, open relating, whether that means you're opening up your relationship to include other people or you're just opening up more authentically to each other. I give you the skill sets that you need to build a relationship that works for you because we weren't given the skills and tools we need to build the relationships we want and deserve. So whether you're working with somebody like Sophia to really explore those, sexual curiosities and, release things in that space, or you're working with somebody like me, or ideally both, so that you're really addressing all the needs in your life. Getting curious that's not a problem. It's not signing you up for something. Doing a session with me does not make you non-monogamous. Doing a session with Sophia does not make you a submissive for the rest of your life, or mean you have. It means you're curious and you're looking to educate yourself more because we don't have these materials readily available in mainstream society. You have to seek it out on your own, and it's perfectly normal and perfectly healthy to be curious about what's possible, even if you decide that monogamy is the relationship dynamic that works for you, learning more about relationship dynamics across the board is only going to strengthen your relationship. And even if you decide, you know what, I thought I was a lot kinkier or I needed these things and actually they're not for me, now you know. Now you have this awareness and this skill set. Sorry, I interrupted you, please.
No. I acknowledge that people enter conventional relationship structures by the majority, and I did that too, and I was stuck for a while, so I do have empathy for people. And also people choose traditional structures to have a family, raise kids, and so it is in the best interest of their family that they stay together. But it doesn't mean you're not still submissive, and you need a space, an outlet for that too. And that's why I will entertain people who are not fully out there with their desires. I know that they still need a safe space.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what we run into when we have, you know, a compulsory relationship structure. Like we have the society that says monogamy is the only way, but also doesn't give us any skills on how to actually create that relationship dynamic. So again, just getting curious, learning from professionals and experts like the two that you see on your screen right now, the two that you're listening to. There's actually a ton of folks like us out there. We are by no means the only resources, but we are certainly great resources to start with. So you can see a bunch of links in my Instagram profile, some of the workshops I have coming up. You can always find me on my website at passport2pleasure.com. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Substack, I'm on Instagram, I'm on I'm all the things at passport2pleasure. I do work directly with clients. I provide online courses and resources, tons of free content on all the platforms you just heard, as well as some retreats that I'll be launching next year and other events as well. And Sophia, I'd love for you to share again where people can find that wonderful book that you have come out now and everything else that you offer.
Thank you for that. I also conduct workshops for women on female sexual empowerment and female dominance. So if you've been wondering and you want some very specific ways to direct and be a dom, I have all my information on sophiadomina.com. And I'm hosting a play party and a workshop just for women, November 16th. And then a play party and a workshop. The play party is for all, the workshop is still just for women on December 7th. So I have these parties pretty frequently, and it's invite only. I vet all my guests to ensure it's like a fun mix, but also very safe. For anybody who's entering that space for the first time, is really curious, this is a good party to start with. Awesome. And also my book. The book, Dom and Dom.
Get used to talking about it.
I know. I do so many things. Dom and Domer, you can also get that on Amazon or on my site or on domanddomer.com.
Beautiful. One of my favorite titles. Honestly, I love a pun. Love a pun. Oh, we've got some love coming in on the comments. Thank you all so much for joining. And yeah, hopefully we will see you at some of our upcoming workshops or parties or retreats or all the things we've got going on. Check out our links in both of our profiles. And if you're watching the replay of this, remember, we're here, we're real. I check the comments. If you've got questions we didn't address, drop them in the comments. We'll get back to you, and you can always reach out. But it's such a delight to have this conversation and really explore the impact of power exchange, both from a sexual standpoint and also an emotional standpoint when we're building our relationships. I just love talking about this kind of stuff.
Me too. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us on Open Dialogue. This is my monthly Instagram Live. It will be also launching as a podcast in the new year. But right now we're doing them live every month on the 13th at 12 p.m. noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we will have conversations just like this and more every month moving forward. So thank you all again so much for joining us. And thank you, Sophia, for giving us so generously of your time and expertise. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.